very short ayat. There's a few exceptions to that rule, but they're very powerful, very short verses. We have in the books of hadith and in the commentaries of the Quran, we have hadith from the Prophet and the Imams where they give us the fadilat, the merits, the benefit of reciting every chapter of the Quran. So let me begin with the hadith we have from our fifth Imam. It's been narrated that our fifth Imam, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, Allahumma salli. It's been related in the books of hadith that the fifth Imam has been reported as saying the following. He says, "Man qara'a al-qari'a wa akthara min qira'atiha, amanahu Allahu azza wa jal fi fitnati ad-dajjal wa min fayhi jahannam." He says that the one who reads Surah Al-Qari'ah and who frequently recites it. So he says as he says is the wa akthara min qira'atiha, who continuously recites Surah Al-Qari'ah, Allah will give that person two specific things. One is that He will safeguard that person from the fitna, from the trials of Dajjal. And Dajjal in itself is a huge topic. It is in the discussion of the Akhir al-Zaman, the latter days before the time of the 12th Imam. This character, this personality, this ideology, which is known as this Dajjal, that it will make it'll make its appearance. I don't want to go into that tonight. That's obviously a very lengthy discussion. But the fifth Imam says that if you continuously recite Surah Al-Qari'ah and you are frequently in its recitation, that you will be protected, we will be protected from the fitna of Dajjal. And we will be saved from the heat of the fire of hell. So two important benefits to keep in mind. And again, as I said, these are very short chapters. This one is 11 verses. You know, some of the verses have 2 words. So they're not very hard for you and I to memorize. Maybe we read it 10, 15, 20 times, and we can memorize this short chapter. But the key point also that our scholars emphasize is that it's not just enough to read and memorize the chapter to get this benefit. On top of that, we have to see what is the content of the surah and how does it fit into my life. Meaning that we put the chapter into practice within our lives. And we'll see that in this chapter, in this surah, there are certain things that we can put in place. And so if we learn the surah, we recite it, we memorize it, and then we apply it, then we can get these benefits as promised to us. And in this hadith from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So obviously this chapter begins with the phrase Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, as 113 other chapters of the Quran does, in which Allah says, in the name of Allah, the all-beneficent, the all-merciful. And this is Allah, this is how we recognize Allah, that He is a Lord of mercy, of compassion. He's a Lord of forgiveness. And even in Ramadan, when we're fasting 16, 17, 18-hour days, and we think that this is such a difficult thing upon us, realize there's rahmah, there's mercy in this difficulty. Right? Because as we know in life, nothing comes easy. Right? There's always a challenge in everything. And a challenge to get Allah's mercy is we go through certain hardships and difficulties in our life. Allah then says, Al-Qari'ah. He uses one word. Literally, that's the very first verse, Al-Qari'ah. Then He says, Mal-Qari'ah. What is this thing? And I won't translate it now. Let me go through these first few verses before I can adequately translate Al-Qari'ah into English. So He says, Al-Qari'ah. Mal-Qari'ah. What is this thing called Al-Qari'ah? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا-Qari'ah. What will make you and I understand what Al-Qari'ah is? Now, what we see in the Quran, especially in the 30th juz, but spread out in the entire Quran, is that the concept and the theme and the belief in the Day of Judgment is something which comes very frequent in the Quran. In fact, our scholars have mentioned that 1/3 of the Quran is about the Day of Judgment, Yawm al-Qiyamah. 1/3 of the Quran. So if you figure the Quran has 6,300 odd verses, 1/3 of that, about 2,000 ayat of the Quran are about the Day of Judgment. And that shows us that this day, that Day of Judgment, is so important that Allah put extra emphasis in the Quran about it. Maybe one of the reasons why Allah has done this is because if you and I, if humanity on a whole, were to have a true understanding of the Day of Judgment, that there is accountability, there is reward, there is punishment. If we truly internalized and believed this, humanity, our life on earth would be very different than it is today. Right? If you and I knew, and if humanity, again, not only Muslim, but if humanity knew that for every action that we do, there will be either a reward or a punishment, we would think twice about doing anything. Right? When a person kills another person because of money, because of anger, because of rage, if they truly realize that they will be accountable for that action, they wouldn't do it. Right? If a person saw a homeless person on the street, a beggar, and they just walked by them without giving them some food or giving them some money, if you truly believed in the Day of Judgment, you would realize that that would be an act that you would be accountable for depriving another human being of something that they need in life. And so in total, in summary, is that if each and every single human being believed in the Day of Judgment as Islam has given it, right? Because Islam doesn't believe in things like, for example, Christianity says that Jesus died on the cross for their sins. And so they believe they have a straight ticket to paradise. Islam doesn't believe that notion. We say that no, you have to have iman, belief, but you have to do the right actions. Right? Nobody can say that Imam Hussein died in Karbala and now we all go to Jannah. It doesn't work like that, brothers and sisters. We have to still do the actions that we have to do. And again, if humanity believed in the right way of the Day of Judgment, of the right way that we would enter that day and what happens, then I think every single human being would change the way that they function in this world. You wouldn't have theft. You wouldn't have killings. You wouldn't have greed. You wouldn't have people who have billions of dollars while people in the same city don't even have food to eat. And so that maybe is one of the reasons why Allah put so much of an emphasis, is that there will be a day that each and every one of us in this room and in all of humanity will stand in front of Allah, and that we will have to account for every single action that we did. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why did you spend money there? Why did you spend that kind of money? Right? And you think about it, that this is something that you and I see in our day-to-day life. Right? When we travel, when we go out of the country, whether we go to America for a weekend for shopping, or we go overseas, when we come back home into Canada, we scan our passports, and although now the system is changing, but they might ask you, where did you go? How long were you out of the country for? How much did you spend? Right? And you can say, I spent $300, maybe that's within your limit, but they'll ask you, what did you buy with that money, right? They'll say, did you buy this? Are you carrying tobacco? Do you have alcohol? Do you have, whatever? What you have to itemize and let them know. Even if you bought something which was allowed, they still want to know. Imagine on the Day of Judgment, right? We get to that station, right? Today you can say, I was out of Canada for 2 weeks. I went to Iraq for ziyarat. What did you bring back? I brought back this, this, and this. Imagine Allah asks us, where did you go? How long were you on earth? I was there 60 years, Allah. Allah will say, what did you do in 60 years? How much money did you make? How much money did you give in charity? Did you give your khums? Did you help the poor? Did you take care of your family? Did you do all your obligations? Did you pray? Did you fast? And you and I, we can maybe lie to the immigration person in Pearson Airport, but can you lie to Allah? Forget about lying to Allah. As we just read in Surah Yasin, what did Allah say? Al-yawma nakhtimu ala afwahihim. Our mouth will be sealed. And our hands, وَتُقَلِّمُنَا أَيْدِيهِمْ. And our hands will speak to Allah. Our hands will tell Allah, Ya Allah, my owner, he used that money and he went to the gambling casino. He went to do haram with that hand that you gave him. Right? So we have to be aware that we will be accountable. And if we instill that in ourselves and our children, then that will hopefully help us grow up to realize this level of accountability. Now, as I said, that word qari'ah, I didn't yet translate. Allah says, al-qari'ah, mal-qari'ah, wa ma adraka mal-qari'ah. Qariya is an Arabic word, obviously. It comes from the root word qara'a. And it literally means to take one thing and smash it against something else, to hit it against something else in such a way that it makes a loud noise. Now, for example, even something like when you knock on somebody's door, you can say, Qara'tu babahu, for example, I knocked on his door. And we see this in the dua of Sabah of Imam Ali alayhi salam, where we say, Ilahi, Qara'tu baba rahmatika, biyadi raja'i. O Allah, I am knocking at your door of mercy with my hand of hope. So knocking on somebody's door, you're using your hand to knock on the door and you make a sound. Now this word qariya is that same thing. And so if you look in the commentary in English or translations in English, unfortunately, as I've said in the past, that the translations, whether it be in English or any other language, they don't really do justice to the Arabic. So when I looked at, for example, one particular translation, they translated the word qari'ah to be the catastrophe, right? That momentous day, that huge, powerful day, and that's an explanation of the day. But qari'ah again is two things smashing against one another. And so Allah says those two things that will smash, or those things that will smash against one another. Mal qariya, what are those things that will smash against one another? Wama adraka mal qariya, what will make you and I understand what is that thing or those things that will smash against one another? What Allah is saying, and He's talking about the scene on just before the Day of Judgment. Let me just take you into the future for a few moments, because we know that before Yawm al-Qiyamah, before everybody rises from the graves, this world, this earth that we live on today, the entire universe actually, will completely come to a standstill. Everything will be annihilated. Everything will be completely disintegrated. The earth will be gone. We are told in the Quran that the sun and the moon will be joined, that they will collide into one another. وَجُمِيَ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ, as Allah says in the Quran, that the entire existence as we know it will cease to exist as we see it today. And so what Allah is telling us in this passage is that things are going to crash with one another. Before the end of this world, things are going to destroy themselves. And in this case, Allah says, and I'll go on because then we'll see how this fits into the discussion. Again, just keeping in mind it's about things colliding with one another. Allah then says, يَوْمَ يَكُونُ النَّاسُ كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوثِ, the day that mankind will be like scattered moths. If you've ever had, let's say, a barbecue, like a fire pit, or if you're in your backyard in the summer and you have the lights on, right? You'll see if you have a light on at night, a lot of flies are around that light, right? You'll have moths, you'll have insects that are around that light, going around and around. And they're just going back and forth, right? They're just aimlessly flying around that light or around the campfire. They're not really going in a certain direction, except maybe they might get a bit close to the fire and they burn. Allah says on the Day of Judgment, that's what you and I will be like. We'll be running around. What's happening? Right? Because mountains will be destroyed. The rivers will be boiling. Right? The sky, we'll see the sun and the moon just colliding with one another. Asteroids maybe, or meteorites hitting the earth. And you and I, if we're alive, or if Allah raises us up, we'll be running around looking at this scene, like what's happening? I can't believe that these mountains which stood thousands of meters high are now crushed and pulverized into dust. I can't believe that the oceans that I used to take a vacation on a cruise ship, the water is boiling and it's just completely evaporating. And so Allah says on that day, humanity will be running around just completely startled, amazed what's happening to this world. Because maybe we'll see this in the movies today. Maybe Hollywood might make a movie that shows all of this. But on that day, you and I, if we're there, we'll actually experience this. And so as he says, we'll be running around just confused and wondering what's happening. And then Allah says, وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْإِحْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ, and the mountains will be like carded wool. Now, there's a lot of symbolism in these ayat. There's a lot of visual. And obviously I don't have a screen here to show you pictures of what this would look like. And so if you go home tonight, go onto Google or YouTube and Google the term carded wool. How do you card wool? Because basically what Allah is showing us is that the mountains, right? You look at the Rocky Mountains in Alberta, between Alberta and BC, the mountains in Pakistan, the mountains in Afghanistan, the mountains in India. You look at all of these mountains and how huge they are, right? You stand in front of a mountain and it's towering in front of you, thousands of meters up into the sky. Different colors of mountains. Allah says on the day of, before the day of resurrection, when this earth is becoming destroyed, the mountains, he says, kal-ihnil manfush. They'll be like carded wool. And again, you have to go on and Google carded wool to see what the picture looks like. But literally what we're being told is that there will be several things happening. We know that Allah says, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. So they will begin by earthquakes. The earth will begin to tremble. Another level is, as Allah says, this al-Qari'ah, this banging of two things, is the mountains will begin to hit one another. The earthquakes will become so violent, so severe, so intense, that the mountains will bang against one another, and they'll begin to get crushed. And how will they become crushed, or what will they look like once this entire scene is completed? As Allah says, وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْإِحْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. They look like carded wool. They look like dust. Right? They look like maybe the ends of this carpeting here, the ends of the frays of the carpeting, maybe like that. That's all the mountain will be. It'll be just little slivers, rocks, like sand on the beach. And so this is how Allah paints us this picture of what will be happening before this world ends. So keep in mind, humanity will still probably be alive while this is happening. And then we will all die, whoever was alive. All the animals will die, humans will die, the jinn will die, the angels will die. Everything will be gone, except Allah. Except Allah, He will remain. And then from that point on, the Qiyamah begins. We rise up from our graves, we're given life again, and then the accountability happens. And this is where we now come to in the surah, which I'll complete in the next few minutes, where Allah says, فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ. As for that person whose scale is heavy. Now, Allah is using certain terminologies here which are very unique in the Quran. He says, فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ. For that person whose scale is heavy. But he doesn't mean the scale is heavy, he means the actions in the scale are heavy. So there's a lot of things that Allah is expecting us to know and understand. And one of the things that Allah does in the Quran that you'll see time and time again is that He talks to us in our language. So many of us, maybe all of us in this room, know what a scale is, right? We go to shopping for groceries. We buy a pound of bananas or a pound of apples. We put it on a scale, right? And they weigh it and they tell you, this is how much your food costs, your apples cost. Or maybe in Ramadan you want to lose weight, so you step on the scale at the end of the night and you look at it and you think, wow, I've gained 5 pounds this Ramadan instead of losing. So we know what a scale is. So Allah says that on that day, somebody whose scale is heavy, whose actions, good actions, make the scale weigh down. That makes sense to us because we can say, okay, well, that means we have good actions. But again, there's a lot of points in here, but I because of time, I can't really go into all of them. But just a few things to mention of. One is that Allah uses the plural. He says mawazin. He doesn't say mizan. Mizan in Arabic is a singular. Mawazin is the plural. So Allah says whoever's scales, the plural, are heavy. Now why would Allah say whose scales are heavy? We only have one scale. Right? If you go home to weigh yourself, you have one scale. You're not going to say, well, that scale told me 180 pounds, I'll try that scale, and I'll try that one, and I'll try that one, till I get the number I want. No, you have one scale. You go to the grocery store, all the scales, they have multiple scales because of many cashiers, but they're all one. So you can put your apples on one scale or the other and you'll get the exact same weight or very close thereof. So why would Allah say multiple scales? Shouldn't there just be one scale all of our actions go on? All the good actions are here. But he says, no, there's multiple scales around. So here the scholars give multiple possibilities. I'll just mention one or two of them. One is that each and every one of us, every human being, has our own unique scale. My scale is different than your scale. Your scale is different than that lady's scale. That woman's scale is different than somebody, let's say in Africa, their scale. What does that mean? How do you have different scales? If Allah will be just and He will be fair, how can He use different scales? What we understand at one level, and again, I'm just touching the surface of this, is that our actions are not, the reward rather of our actions is not based on the action itself. Okay? Let me say that again. Our actions, the reward that you and I will get for every deed that we perform, will not be the same for each and every one of us. So if I pray 2 rakat and one of you prays the 2 rakat, there is a difference in the reward. If a marja taqleed prays a 2 rakat namaz, and somebody who just came into Islam yesterday prays a 2 rakat salat, there is a potential for them to have a different reward. In fact, even if you have two people, two brothers or two sisters who are identical twins, they both stand for prayer at the exact same time. They're both wearing the same clothing. They recite the same surahs, the same dhikr they recite. It's very well possible that one will get a major reward and one may get nothing or zero. Well, you'll say, well, how is that? How can Allah give somebody more reward and somebody a lesser reward for the same action? One of the things that we believe, and this is based on hadith, is that our reward is equal to our aql, our intellect, our understanding of the action. Am I fasting Ramadan just because I want to lose weight? Or am I fasting because Allah says in the Quran, Kutiba alaykumus siyam? Am I fasting or am I praying rather to show the people that I can pray beautiful long surahs? Or am I praying for the sake of Allah? Every action is not only based on the deed, the physical movement, but the intention of why we did it. And so when Allah says that your mawazeen, you have multiple scales, what He's saying is that everybody in the world, from the time of Adam till the end, will have their own scale to weigh their actions on. A marja taqleed who studied 90 years, his scale is different than our scale. Allah expects more from him because he has more knowledge. He knows the deeper realities, hopefully, of the ibadat. But somebody, let's say a 9-year-old girl, she just became baligh last week. She starts praying this week. She starts fasting this month. She doesn't know all of the realities of praying, and she can't. She just became baligh a few days ago. Her scale is different because she has to be weighed according to her level of intellect. And so that's one opinion, is that everybody has a different scale based on their level of intellect and what they know of the religion. Another possibility is that every action that we do has its own scale. So the salat, the namaz has its own scale. The hajj has its own scale. The ziyarat has its own scale. The charity has its own scale. And every action will be weighed on that scale. So when you, and this is just an example, and just let me mention that this is not in the hadith. We don't have any hadith of why Allah says mawazeen. So scholars are giving us this as a hypothesis. This is a probability. But imagine on the Day of Judgment, we're in front of Allah, and it becomes time to account for our deeds. And as we know, the hadith says the first thing that you'll be held to account for is your salat. If it's accepted, everything else is accepted. Imagine you have to walk, and you walk maybe a kilometer that way. And over there is the scale of your salat. And so you'll weigh your actions, or your actions will be weighed on that scale. Did you fulfill all the requirements? Did you recite everything properly? Did you do everything that you had to do in the salat? It had its own scale. You'll go to the zakat, it has its own scale. Just like in this world today, you go grocery shopping, you put your things on a scale, it may be only 3 or 4 pounds. But then if you want to weigh a pickup truck or a car, you'd go to a commercial scale, right? And that commercial scale weighs For example, those 18-wheelers on the 401, it uses a different scale, but it's a scale at the end of the day. So the scale that you and I would use at home to cook with, to measure ingredients, that's not the kind of scale you'd weigh a car on. And on the 401, when you see those stops where the trucks have to go and weigh the truck, you wouldn't weigh your apples on that scale. So there's a different scale for every action. That's another opinion. Now, as I said, there are multiple opinions. They're not based on hadith. They're based on scholars reflecting on these ayat, because we don't have other ayat of the Quran that explain what the scale is. Although there are a couple of hadith which I'll end with to conclude the program. Anyways, as Allah says, that if your scale is heavy, your good deeds outweigh the bad, because bad are negatives basically. Your scale of good deeds is heavy. You've done all the right things in life. فَهُوَ فِي عَيْشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. Allah says that you would be having a pleasing life. Here, this عَيْشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ, it literally means somebody whose entire life is at comfort. You know, today, each and every one of us, we can say we had a bad day today. Something happened, I had a bad day. I had an accident, I woke up late, this happened. I had a bad day. But in the Akhirah, in Jannah, there's no concept of a bad day. You can't say, I'm really depressed today in Jannah. I'm really upset today in heaven. No, there is no bad days in Jannah. It's all good. It's all good in Jannah. There's no worry, no grief, no sorrow, no tribulation, no problems, no poverty, nothing. It's all good. But then Allah talks about the other group of people. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ. What about those who walk up to that scale of the prayers or the general scale, and Allah says their weight is very light. There's not much heaviness in that scale. What happens to those people? Allah says, فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. Literally, their mother is Hawiyah. Hawiyah is the name which, when you look in the translation, it's translated as the abyss. This deep canyon in Jahannam, a hole which is probably maybe never ending. Right? And that's one of the descriptions of it. But Allah says, فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. His mother is Hawiyah. Now, it doesn't mean your literal mother, but in Arabic, the word has multiple meanings, like al-Qura. Allah talks about Rasulullah being from Ummiyin. Lady Zainab alayha salam is al-Masa'ib. Doesn't mean she's the mother of Masa'ib, the mother of tribulation. Has a different meaning where you use it. And so, what we can understand here, if we use it as the word mother, or that this is the source, or where you're going, is that, naturally when children are young, and when they get older, they run to their mother, right, for comfort. They look for their mother. And so maybe one understanding is that on the Day of Judgment, once the accounts are done, and people are going to hell, they won't need to be told to go to hell. They'll realize that that is their home. That's their abode. So they will just naturally gravitate towards their mother, which is the fire of hell, that pit of hell. Also, it could be that a mother hugs her child. Right? A mother embraces and holds the child close. Maybe that's what it means, that the fire is our home. It will embrace us. It will hug us. It will be all around us and envelope the individual. Whatever the case may be, we ask Allah that we don't go towards the fire of hell. We ask Allah to allow our weight of our scale of deeds to be extremely heavy in the world to come. Let me end with these last two verses and we'll conclude before the time for the iftar tonight and the prayers. Allah says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ. What will show you what it is? He doesn't say, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هَاوِيَ. What will make you know what the pit of fire is? Because this is something we can never imagine, right? We can't fathom that punishment. So he says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ. How or what would make you understand what this fire is? Allah knows you and I could never understand it, right? It's impossible. It's not within our frame of reference to know what this punishment is. And so then Allah gives us an answer, and I'll conclude with this. He says, Narun Hamiya. That this is a scorching fire. Hadith tell us that the fire of hell is so powerful and potent that if the amount of a needle, you've seen the needles, right? You know how small a needle is. Hadith says if the amount of fire from hell, the size of the head of a needle, were to be brought to this earth, it would destroy the entire earth. Just the size of the head of the needle would destroy the entire earth. Now you imagine that a human being is being thrown into that, and then they come alive again, and then they're continuously being in that fire. What will happen to that individual? What will be the outcome of such a person? Obviously, we ask Allah that we are not of those individuals to face that fate. And so let me just mention two hadith and I'll end with this. We have one hadith which tells us that and this is mentioned in the books of hadith, reported that we have been told that inna amir al-mu'minin wal-a'immata min dhurriyatihi alayhim as-salam humul mawazin. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Imams from his progeny, they are the mawazin, they are the scales. Meaning that our actions have to be in line with what their teachings are. If we follow the Prophet and his family, Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Imams, we try our best to follow them, then they are the scale against which we will have to weigh our actions. Another hadith says, "Wal al-mizanu al-adl," the justice of Allah is the scale. And obviously we know that Allah is fair. He will never be unjust to us. Whatever we do in this world, we will get the reward. If we do a sin, we will get the punishment for it. I'll end with this. People may say, well, what are practical tips? What are things I can do today to get that scale heavier? Make my scale thaqeel, make it heavy. Just two things, I'll end with that. One is, as I said, to do good actions. Al-amal al-salih. Be a good person. But do it for the right intention. Don't do good because people are looking at you. Right? Don't do good because you want your name to be mentioned in the announcements. That this person gave this much money, they did this, they, whatever. No, do it with the intention that you want to do a good action because goodness is good in and of itself. That's the first thing, is be good, but be good for the right reason. And second, I'll end with this, and inshallah another day maybe we'll go into more detail, is that we recite as much as we can the salawat on Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. That is the hadith. Hadith tell us, I don't have the reference tonight, but maybe another day, or maybe we'll have it emailed out, that the thing which will be the heaviest in our deeds on the Day of Judgment is a salawat on the Prophet and his family. More than anything, is sending salawat on the Prophet. And it's so easy, we can all do it. You might say, I haven't memorized the Quran, I can't read Quran while I'm going to work. Okay, but you all know the salawat. We learned it when we were in the womb of our mother. You're going to work, if you can't read Quran, read salawat. Just continue to say, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, all the way to work, all the way to school. You're in the grocery line, you're waiting to pay. Keep reciting salawat. You and I won't find the value today, right? It won't be in our bank balance now. But get to the Day of Judgment, you look at your scale, and you'll be like, where did all of this khair, goodness come from? And Allah will tell us, do you remember one day you're in the line at the bank waiting to pay your bill? Or you're in the grocery store, and you kept reciting the salawat on the Prophet out of love of Rasulullah and the family? All of those salawat I've joined together, now they're there for you to enjoy. So I conclude with that on this blessed night of Ramadan. I ask Allah to give us the tawfiq to continue to engage in His worship, to follow the ordinances that Allah has laid down for us. And we ask Allah to give us the ability to fast, to pray, to give in charity, to think about other people over ourselves in this blessed month of Ramadan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We ask Allah to give the thawab to the marhumin of our family, our community and friends. Let us conclude with one Surah Al-Fatiha. But before that, one salawat upon Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. غير المكذوب عليهم ولا الضالين. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Just a quick announcement, brothers and sisters. As you can see, the calendar has been printed out and posted over here. There are a few copies that have been known of that people can take away for the timings of all the prayers and iftar and imsak, as noted out over here and as sent out to the community as well. Just reminding my youngsters especially, as mentioned last week as well, a series of seminars for student counseling for career counseling have been arranged. And inshallah, the topic for the upcoming seminar this Sunday for high school students or university students who are pursuing a career is medicine. So inshallah, we'll have speakers who will be coming. The event will take place, is arranged by Al-Husayni Madrasa. It'll take place in the Eastwood Collegiate Institute from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. inshallah.
My father said they were laughing this week and last week. He was asking me about it.